Hello? The channel is finally hitting around 100 subscribers. As you may already know, the type of video I put out does not do well in the YouTube algorithm. It doesn't have good watch time, nor does it have a catchy thumbnail with a face on it. So if you really want to see more and want to help the channel to grow, please help share it to the world. Enjoy the video. Growing up in Malaysia, I've met many people who had gastric pains, which I believe they are referring to a type of peptic ulcer called gastric ulcers. And I myself have never, that I could remember, felt like I've experienced it. Sure, I have countless food poisonings, but that's pretty much it when it comes to stomach aches or abdominal pains. The general idea that I learned from listening to my teacher and other adults around me at the time is that gastric ulcers occur when the acid in the stomach gets too concentrated or too much, and it literally burns a hole and causes a wound inside your stomach, which is not wrong, just not the whole story. I was taught that the reason for having too much or strong acid in the stomach is caused by not eating when you're supposed to. The idea is that if you are to skip lunch, for example, the hydrochloric acid that's supposed to be digesting your lunch has nothing else to do but digest your stomach wall lining instead. I actually came up with my own theory when I asked the question, what defines when we're supposed to eat? Because I learned about Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning. One of his famous experiments goes like this. He rings a bell in front of a dog, and the dog has no response to the bell. But then he feeds the dog right after. He repeats this for many days, and eventually the dog associates that the food comes after the bell is rung. So one day, he rang the bell with no food, but the dog, upon hearing the bell, started to drool even though it is not about to be fed. So I've concluded that it was us that made lunchtime. We as a whole decided when our eating time should be, and by doing so, conditioned our body to expect food during that time. Therefore, like the dog, even though there is no food yet, our gastric juices are still at its most concentrated during that time of day when you're supposed to eat. Which means if you skip a meal, you might burn a hole in your stomach. But when you really think about it, our early ancestors did not have a fixed schedule because food was inconsistent. So can it be that our bodies weren't supposed to be eating at a fixed schedule? After all, different foods and quantities of food should keep us full for different durations. But as mentioned at the start of the video, that is not the whole truth about gastric ulcers, because a lot of the time, there can be different causes of gastric ulcers. In fact, there are multiple types of abdominal pains that might be mistaken for a kind of gastric ulcer. For example, when the gastric juices make it up to your esophagus where there is less protection to the acid, we call that gastroesophageal reflux disease or heartburn. If the acid leaks past the stomach to the duodenum, it could cause another type of peptic ulcer called the duodenum ulcer, and many more. However, getting back to the main topic, which is the gastric ulcers, a lot of the time our mucosal defense, which consists of a protective mucus layer, is actually good enough to protect our stomach lining from the strong hydrochloric acids. But certain medication and a bacteria, like the Helicobacter pylori, could break down this protective layer. In fact, in a study around the 1980s, it is believed that the Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori for short, is the main culprit for most cases of gastric ulcers, which can be easily treated with a series of antibiotics. And this is the actual whole reason for this video, not just to clear a misconception, but to share how naive I was. Just because something could be justified still doesn't mean that it is true, and for a long time we were governed by tradition and the beliefs that were passed down to us. Not all are wrong, but sometimes we should verify and test things out. So as a summary here, if you have recurring gastric pains, please see a doctor. And also, it is okay to humble ourselves sometimes enough to doubt and verify on what we think we already know. Wow, you made it to the end of the video. Like the video if you like it or dislike it if you do not, but make sure you explain why down in the comments so that this channel can further improve based on your feedback. Oh, and subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching and have a pleasant day. Bye bye.